All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Um, Welcome to SCIL Works 2026. Assessment is constructed and contextual, measuring what matters in information literacy. My name is Liz Galuzis. I'm the current chair of SCIL, and I'm the DEI Strategies Librarian at the University of California, Irvine. And I'm happy to welcome you to this day of professional development and learning. I'm really looking forward to hearing from our presenters. And I very much appreciate that you are all taking the time to participate here today. I know I've taken a lot of solace lately in community, and it's a pleasure to be able to spend time in this community today. I wanted to mention that the captions should be enabled. If you're having trouble accessing them, please let us know in the chat. And on this slide, you can see the other members of the SCIL board, as well as members of the SCIL Works planning committee. There's some overlap between them who all helped to put this event together. And I want to thank them all so much to those volunteers for their service. You will be hearing from some of them throughout the day as they introduce our presenters. If you aren't familiar with SCIL or Southern California Instruction Librarians, we're an interest group of CARL, California Academic and Research Libraries, which is the California chapter of ACRL, the Association of College and Research Libraries. And if you're interested in joining future planning committees or the board, you can select SCIL as an interest group when you sign up or renew your CARL membership. And so currently CARL membership is $40, but participation in interest groups are free. And we're also going to be doing a call for new board members soon. Watch for that. So feel free to reach out to any of us with any questions about serving on the board. I've really enjoyed it. So I'm going to put a link to join Carl in the chat if you're not already a member. Let me just change this. Okay. And I'll also put a link to join the SCIL listserv, which you don't have to be a member of Carl to join. And you can also, that's where you'll see the calls for the board members, announcements about our events, all of that kind of thing. Okay, so I'm going to move on here. So we're going to start today with a land acknowledgement. I know that we're all joining from different places, but before I read this acknowledgement, which is based on general Southern California area. I wanted to say we invite you to post the names of the tribes who are the traditional land stewards and caretakers for your location in the Zoom chat, along with any ways to support them. If you don't know, you can find a map of Indigenous peoples' lands at the link that I'm going to put next in the chat. And so, for example, today I'm working from Tongva land. So I'm adding a link for the Tongva Tarahat Pahava Conservancy. And yeah, so feel free to do that while I am reading this. I will read it in its entirety. So we acknowledge that this virtual conference is taking place primarily throughout the unceded territory of California, home to nearly 200 tribal nations. As we begin this event, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of our various regions. We intend this as one of many steps toward working with Native communities to secure meaningful partnership and inclusion in the stewardship and protection of their cultural resources and homelands. So let's take a moment to honor these ancestral grounds that we're collectively gathered upon and support the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown worldwide. So I'll just pause while people, if you want to put in where you're coming from or ways to support Indigenous communities in your area. Okay, thanks, Ariana. Oh, hi, Lisa. Hi. Okay, great. All right, so please keep them coming. But I do want to give a sort of layout for the day here. Um, this is our basic schedule. So we'll have two breaks in between sessions, one at 10:25 and one at 11:35. So if you see a presentation, that's going to be 20 minutes with 10 minutes of Q&A, and the show and tells are 10 minutes with 5 minutes of Q&A. I'm going to put a link in the chat to our full program where you can see which sessions will be recorded and which will not. And we'll pause the recording accordingly and post the rest as one video on our YouTube channel, which can take a little time, but we'll let you know when we do. And then we also have a collaborative notes document, which you can contribute notes to or look over them later. So particularly for the sessions that aren't being recorded, that might be helpful. And I'll post that link throughout the day. Okay. And then finally, I'm going to put a link to the Carl Code of Conduct, which you all agreed to by registering for this event. It includes a form for reporting violations. And the short version of this code is, I think, encapsulated in this sentence from it, which is, we expect all participants in Carl-related spaces, including guests and vendors, to behave in ways that support the dignity and well-being of everyone present. And so there's more detail in the full statement, but that's kind of the spirit of it, I would say. All right. Well, so we are looking forward to a great conference. We're 2 minutes ahead of schedule right now, but we're our first presentation is not going to be recorded. So I just want to make a note of that. And give me one moment. And Samantha Hilton, who's our SCIL Vice Chair, is going to introduce that first presentation. Dominique and Amanda, are you ready? Okay, so I'm going to pause the recording. Nope, I just paused the screen sharing. Okay.
Thank you. I'm excited to introduce our next presenter, my colleague, Katie. So Katie is doing a show and tell entitled Assessment in the Moment, using shared documents and reflective surveys to measure what matters in one-shot instruction. Katie Perry is a librarian at Cal State LA, where she supports the social sciences through research, instruction, outreach, and information literacy initiatives. Her research interests include information literacy and AI literacy in higher education, social justice approaches to librarianship, and the ways identity and representation shape library work. So take it away, Katie.
Hi, folks. Thanks, Ariana. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so can everyone see it? Yeah. So yeah, my name is Katie, and I'm just going to do a quick show and tell, titled Assessment in the Moment, using shared documents and reflective surveys to measure what matters most in one-shot instruction. Just a little bit about me. I am a social sciences librarian at Cal State LA. I have a lot of liaison areas, so I work with sociology, psychology, political science, and the geosciences and environment, which means that we have a lot of, one-shot instruction um, in all of these departments. And so for context, you know, a lot of us teaching in one-shot instruction have a lot of constraints. We have time constraints. Students with, different levels of experience using library databases or, um, research abilities, right? We are teaching to varied subjects, and we have this increased pressure to prove, impact. And on top of it, students are often, completing multiple evaluations for courses. So we have student assessment fatigue. And what I'm going to show you today is really just what I have found, you know, useful for me in assessment, and it's creating something that's instructional, immediate, and respectful of the student labor. So shout out to Carolyn Caffrey, who's here today. Um, she really is, when I was a newborn baby librarian, introduced me to instruction and, different, I've tried many different things, but I go back to these models that were introduced to me by her, which is this shared document, which I use as a formative in-class activity, but also instructional assessment for myself. And then at the end, I offer a reflective survey, which is optional and happens again after the session. And the tools, obviously work together. So in class, we have this activity where I ask students to think of a research topic in a complete sentence or ask it as a question. Again, it helps them become a little more specific. And then to pull out their key words using building logic, something, how would they write this when they're searching the library database? And then find a relevant article and, copy and paste an APA citation or whatever they're working with. Um, and this, it helps with assessment in real time because it's totally visible to everyone. It's on the screen. But it helps me see patterns immediately. Like, are there overly broad questions? Are there any missing concepts? Um, is there confusion around peer-reviewed? Can they find peer-reviewed articles? Can they identify that? Is there weak keyword translation, right? So instead of assessment happening after instruction, it really is the instruction. I can evaluate learning while students are actively working. And of course, I'm not grading this. I'm just using it to adjust, clarify, and workshop strategies live. So it's really kind of the assessment that's being embedded into teaching, um, and instructional adjustment, right? And of course, many of us do something like this all the time, just as part of the activities. We want to see students using, uh, if they can use databases correctly, if they're understanding the concepts that we're teaching. But I think that this really also, the more I used it, I realized that it was an assessment tool for me to assess learning again in real time. Okay, so this does capture conceptual learning, right? And a little bit of the research process thinking. It does not attempt to measure long-term retention or writing quality or even necessarily like the correctness of a topic. So I have to be very intentional about what I'm assessing when I'm doing this, right? And I'm not trying to assess things for compliance oriented assessment. This is just for me to keep learning in the moment. And then after a session, I always have a QR code up with a library survey that's optional and anonymous. And it's not trying to measure skill, measuring perception, transfer, and context, right? Which feels realistic for a one-shot. I asked them, of course, which course was this for, since I teach multiple, the information skills I learned today. So this is a Likert scale. And what is the most important thing you think you learned? Is there anything you wish we had more time to discuss? And then I leave a blank space for additional comments. Um, right. So, of course, is there anything that you wish we discussed that can inform future sessions, right? A lot of times, additional comments are just, you did great. I like your sweatshirt. I wish you had snacks. But there are a lot of complimentary comments in there that is nice when you are trying to prove impacts, like in your RTP process or something, right? But I also have found them to really inform my teaching. So I do have like a couple of examples for the additional comments specifically. Um, so in September, I had a student to ask me to teach AI, right? Because the Cal State system uh, has a contract with OpenAI and ChatGPT. So please try to like incorporate it. And I thought that was important. And I always say like when someone's asking a question in class, go ahead and ask it. If you have the question, somebody else obviously does too. I feel like it's like that with the comments, right? So I do try to take them seriously. And so since this comment came to my attention and since they made a valid point that we do have access, I needed to try to integrate AI into my one-shot instruction, which we already, again, are limited on time and all of that. But I did make the attempt. And so then in November, I had this, and this was a student, there was no faculty in the classroom other than me. It severely disappoints me that academic figures are unwilling to unequivocally condemn the use of AI technology in the course of research. I wish that would stop hearing otherwise credible figures say, generally you shouldn't, or it has its uses, when all evidence shows that it's actively harmful to cognitive ability and that continuing to allow it will only harm the integrity of your institution. So I had to like really take this in and think about it. And again, totally valid points, right? And so since this, I've really tried to be more intentional with the way that I discuss AI in my one-shots, if I discuss it at all. I'm kind of now thinking that I have to remove it from my one-shots. There just isn't enough time to go over all of the ethics behind AI and all of the ways that we can use it in research. Um, so I found that interesting, and really these comments do inform my teaching. So they are useful. Again, the takeaway is that assessment can be super low stakes. It's context aware, reflective, and of course, instructionally useful. So it's just about making intentional choices that can make assessment a little bit more humane, um, especially when we're in these constrained environments like one-shots, right? And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. I really enjoyed your presentation, and I think you speak to the bind that we're often in one-shot instruction, where we have other faculty obligations related to AI, right? What the professor wants, what the university wants, and what we think as a profession. So I think you demonstrated a good reflection and personal growth process. So I appreciate it. We have about 10 minutes for questions, so yeah, please feel free to put them in the Q&A or in the chat or raise your hand. Lisa?
Thank you, Katie. This was really wonderful. I'm at Cal State Northridge, so totally get the AI questions that you raise. I'm curious, so do you do this for you have them do this reflective assessment for every one shot that you teach? And then do you have a separate assessment that you have to use for your RTP, or do you use this one?
I do, and again, this is optional, so it's a QR code at the end of my slides, on every one shot that I teach, every workshop really. And I do use it for my RTP. I do not have anything separate. This is not institutional. It's something that I use on my own. Again, I was introduced to this concept and, got in the habit of doing this when I first became a librarian. And I found that it has been super helpful, again, just to inform my own teaching, but also when we are asked to kind of demonstrate our impact in that review process. I could take some of those really nice quotes, right, and throw it in my RTP. So it is helpful in that way. And I can also show how I've taken those comments and adjusted my teaching. So I see one question about the response rate. And it's so varied. I haven't like crunched my numbers, but some classes, especially if I have faculty sitting in on the session, they'll say, go ahead, take the time, take the survey. And I might get like, 95% of the course doing it. And other times, especially since I've been trying to like integrate more topics, um, I'm really pushing to the end of the class period. And so by the time that I'm over and they get that QR code, everyone's just ready to go. So certain classes, I might get one or two responses. Others, I might get 25.
I misspoke. We have 5 minutes for questions. So yeah, there's another one in the chat.
Oh, talk more about handling feedback that contradicts each other. It's really I have to try to use my own common sense in that case, right? And it's hard. I mean, right now, especially because things are changing in the information universe and in libraries and the way that like we're approaching things, right? I think for a long time we could, we're asked to teach to databases specifically, right? And so we get in that grove of teaching for databases or teaching to specific assignments that we're kind of used to. And so now having these new concepts thrown in like AI literacy or whatever, it is a touchy subject, and we just have to be aware of that. Like professors, some of them want you to, they want you to talk about it. Some of them will ask for a second one shot specifically on it, which is my preference. And some will say, don't talk about it at all. But then we have students who are like asking questions about it in class, right? So it's really hard, actually. I'm in a hard place. And uh, I'm excited to have some like institutional policy soon, hopefully, about how we go about with certain changes that are happening in the information landscape right now. Um, but really, I just have to feel out the class. And when I do talk, when contradictory things do come up, I like acknowledging that kind of either in that session if there's time, or in other sessions and opening it up to like this conversation and asking the students kind of what they want from the class. I think that that's okay too. Yeah, I'm not sure that I answered your question. I don't think there's a really good way to do that, but I do my best.
We have one more minute. Any final questions? All right. Well, thank you so much, Katie.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, let me do a few things here. And then our next presentation is not going to be recorded. So I will pause the recording in just a moment. Just going to unspotlight Katie. And then Kristen, who's on our committee and our board, is going to introduce our next presentation.
Awesome. Welcome back, everybody. Up next, we have a presentation with presenters Hugh Burkhart and Martha Adkins. Their topic, the title for their presentation, sorry, is Information Literacy and the Core Curriculum, Advising Faculty on Curriculum Revision. Hugh Burkhart is a professor and the coordinator of instruction and undergraduate learning at the University of San Diego's Copley Library. He has published and presented on topics related to library instruction and information literacy. In 2024, he won Catholic Library World's John Brubaker Memorial Award for his article College Bridge Programs and the Academic Library, Creating and Sustaining the Pontum Partnership. His book chapter, The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and Academic Programming for Future-Bound College Students, a case study of academic library outreach, co-authored with Martha Adkins, appears in Advances in Librarianship, case exemplars of how academic libraries promote sustainable communities. He is also a published writer of short fiction. And Martha Adkins is an associate professor and research and instruction librarian at the University of San Diego. She is a subject liaison to multiple undergraduate humanities departments and to the Franciscan School of Theology. She received her MSLIS from the University of North Texas and an MA from Yale Divinity School. Her research interests and prior publications include topics on diversity, equity, and inclusion practices in the libraries of faith-based institutions, citation analysis for scholarly communication studies, and the history of the book. Her service commitments have focused on information literacy, community engagement, and sustainability and climate justice. All right, please take it away, Hugh and Martha.
Thanks, Ariana. I'm going to take a moment to share my screen. All right, there we are. So good morning, everybody. I'm Hugh.
Hi, I'm Martha. Sorry, I got a note about unmuting. Nice to see you all.
Yeah, it was great to see all of the course level and tutorial level assessment presentations this morning. I was busy taking notes and saving links. We're going to pull the camera back now and give a wider view of assessment, and as we talk about how we participated in advising faculty on the curriculum revision, specifically as it pertains to the revision of the undergraduate core curriculum, i.e. the general education requirements at the University of San Diego. Over the course of our presentation, we're going to talk about the initial 2017 core curriculum revision, and that was actually a 3-year drafting and approval process. And it's been kind of cathartic for Martha and I to go through this and relive, more than 10 years of work, and how that revision led to the initial critical thinking and information literacy, or CTIL, competencies. Um, which were then reviewed in the initial information literacy assessment that occurred the same year that the 2017 core curriculum revision was launched. And that subsequently led to the CTIL revision process, which ultimately resulted in our new information literacy flag implementation, which happened last fall. And because this is a conference for librarians, we're going to talk about the role of librarians throughout this process.
Excuse me. Yeah, so this timeline kind of follows along with what Hugh just laid out. The undergraduate core curriculum began revision in 2013. It was a 2-year process of revisions and then another 2 to 3 years of approval processes from the university faculty level to the university faculty senate to the board of trustees, and then it was implemented in the fall of 2017. In the spring of 2018, the first area of the new core curriculum was assessed, and that was critical thinking and information literacy. And let's see, we had, as a result, we'll go into a little more detail in following slides, but as a result of that assessment, task force was formed in 2019. Following the COVID-19 pandemic, we had two second and third task forces tasked with revision of where critical thinking and information literacy would fit in the core curriculum. And then we're going to end at years 2024 to present when we implement the new flags.
I pulled up here what the original learning outcomes for information literacy were as devised when the core curriculum was revised. And as you read through those, I don't want to take the time to read them all out loud because I do want to talk a little bit about the background of the core so that we're all on the same page with conceptually what we're working with. So originally there were 3 competency areas in the new core curriculum, or general education requirements for undergrads, that were slated to be embedded in other areas of the core curriculum, either in the foundations or explorations area of the core. Information literacy and critical thinking were twinned as a competency, or together as competencies, quantitative reasoning, and oral communication. There was a critical thinking and information literacy task force that outlined all the areas of the core in which critical thinking and information literacy outcomes aligned with either foundation or exploration outcomes across the curriculum. And even with the outcomes of other flags, such as advanced writing. But when it came time to find an area to embed these competencies, only critical thinking and information literacy were embedded. Quantitative reasoning and oral communication were changed to flags, which would stand on their own. And that's important to note when we get to how information literacy was later revised a second time. Critical thinking and information literacy was embedded in the exploration area of historical inquiry. Members of that task force, historical inquiry, and the CTIL task force agreed that there was enough in alignment with learning outcomes that it would be a good fit. And I do have to note that this is all at the university level that this is happening, and we, as faculty members of the University of San Diego, we participated in these processes, and that's how we had an in on that, as opposed to there being a requirement that the librarians were part of this process. So you can see on the right side of your screen how information literacy was embedded within historical inquiry. And you can see that those learning outcomes on the left side of your screen were incorporated into the historical inquiry. And I have to note that on the right, the learning outcomes on the right side of your screen is what the students would see. So they did not see all of the information literacy specific language that we see in those original learning outcomes as devised, because the learning outcomes for historical inquiry had to incorporate historical inquiry learning outcomes and critical thinking learning outcomes, and they were kind of enmeshed together. And so once these courses were launched and the courses were actually taught, um, information literacy was highlighted as the first area to be assessed in the undergraduate core curriculum. And that happened in the year that the core was implemented. I'm going to let Martha talk a little bit about that in a moment. But again, I just want to stress, what the original learning outcomes were for critical thinking and information literacy, noting especially that there was one learning outcome that we as librarians would understand as dedicated exclusively to information literacy, and that is appropriately and ethically acknowledge sources, and that comes through in the historical inquiry formal learning outcomes that students see. The other information literacy specific outcomes and the skills involved uh, are uh, are a little hidden to the students because we have these outcomes serving triple duty, as it were.
That's right. So the semester after the new undergraduate core curriculum was implemented, the critical thinking and information literacy as embedded in historical inquiry was chosen as the first area to be assessed in the core curriculum. Um, Student work was evaluated, chosen from a select sources of historical inquiry classes, according to a rubric informed by the AAC&U value rubric for information literacy, which was informed by the old standards. Hugh and I were both on the team to assess critical thinking and information literacy, along with faculty from all over campus, including history, philosophy, theology, religious studies, environmental ocean sciences. Um, the process was sort of, we had in-person meeting days where we normed the rubric. We worked independently to evaluate classes. I think each one of us did a handful of classes and then or assignments, sorry, and each assignment was evaluated at least twice by two people. And then we met again in person to discuss our findings and some of the outcomes of that assessment. Hugh just linked to the website where some of that is available and in discussion, and you can link through when you get the slides for that. But some of the things that came up after we did that assessment, a lot of things came up. I'll get to the confusing approval process in a sec, and maybe some of the details are challenging for library instruction. But some of the things that came to the surface right away with this assessment project were that students were receiving a wide range of information literacy instruction and opportunity to practice the outcomes. We saw students presented with a variety of ways to search for, evaluate, and utilize sources for their writing for these classes. Some instructors had students searching independently. Some of them had sources handed directly to them. And then some students were told to choose within a set source, like a bibliography. They could choose sources within a set bibliography. And all those things meant information literacy to the instructors who assigned them. They felt like they were aligning with learning outcomes. So a variety of ways to implement that. We saw courses taught at every level of the undergraduate experience. There was a lack of transparency that Hugh already alluded to with the information literacy and critical thinking outcomes buried in the historical inquiry outcomes. We had some issues with transfer students who would get credit for history courses, but there wasn't really a way for us to evaluate whether they were getting critical thinking and information literacy instruction in those classes. And then there were issues with all history classes having to incorporate the critical thinking and information literacy outcomes into their syllabi. Not everybody wanted to have that level of instruction in their classes.
And from
Go ahead.
yeah, and from a library perspective, it also poses a challenge for instruction, especially for the history liaison. Our history liaison at the time was also the head of access and outreach services. So as you can imagine, that part of that person's role took precedent. They couldn't possibly have reached all of those historical inquiry courses. We would have had to have gone for with a distributed model for instruction across the instruction librarian faculty at Copley Library. And not to get too far down into the weeds, for approving these courses in core curriculum committee meetings, which are that's service work. It's not part of our regular role. Although now, as part of my role as coordinator, I do serve on the core curriculum committee regularly. That's part of my duty, but it's a service role. It was challenging because you had a core area representative for historical inquiry and one core area representative for critical thinking and information literacy. And sometimes there was confusion about how a course got approved and how you would weigh in as the CTIL core area representative. And that was understood in the core curriculum committee and amongst history faculty who dealt regularly with these courses. So, out of all that came the CTIO revision process pre-COVID. So, a new task force was formed on the basis of the results of that assessment project. Two librarians were involved, that were Martha and myself, and our involvement really came from our interest as instruction librarians in this process. By that time, I was coordinator. I wasn't a coordinator. I was a reference and instruction librarian when the initial core revision process started. And that process started with the 2019 process, started with investigating models of how critical thinking and information literacy are a part of the undergraduate general education requirements at various institutions. I chaired the initial task force in 2019, spring 2019, which included faculty members from theology, religious studies, business, and engineering, along with Martha from Copley Library. And our task force worked through 2020, up to the point where we had created presentations that were to provide faculty at USD with models that could inform our new model for critical thinking and information literacy. We were about to have faculty forums. The dates were set. Then the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and all of that work came to a halt as we all dealt with what was going on as we all went to remote work.
So we picked up where we left off after we all started to trickle back from the pandemic. 2021, a new task force was created. It was quite a large task force with faculty from all over campus. I was on that task force. We were charged with researching, picking up where the first task force left off, but also doing some more research on different models of how critical thinking and information literacy might fit in the undergraduate core curriculum. Doing those faculty forums that we had planned back in 2020, soliciting feedback from faculty, and presenting that feedback and rankings of different models to the core curriculum committee and making a recommendation for one of those models to move forward. And what that task force ended up doing was recommending separating critical thinking and information literacy, making them both flags. We also recommended funding be allocated for faculty development and for a fellows program for those people who would be involved in helping develop courses for both critical thinking and information literacy flags. In 2023, the final task force was formed. Subcommittees, two subcommittees, one for critical thinking and one for information literacy. I was the chair for the information literacy subcommittee, and the charge for those committees was to draft new learning outcomes for each area. And then we had to go through the approval process again with faculty on campus approving them, and then it would go to the faculty senate. And then these are the new learning outcomes. He's going to go through them. But one of the things we did before it went to a faculty vote was we presented these to the library faculty for endorsement.
Yeah. So our endorsement was separate from actually getting a vote. So even though we are an independent academic unit on campus, we don't host undergraduate programs, and so we did not get a formal vote. But we did get a say in crafting these learning outcomes, which we felt were much more informed by the information literacy framework. The original definition that we were working with information literacy in the initial core curriculum revision was really informed by the WASC and the AAC and U definitions. So these new learning outcomes, which we're working with now, they had to go to a vote and be approved by every school with an undergraduate program. And then it went to the faculty senate, which in the interest of time, I'm going to go to the actual implementation process of these learning outcomes. And this is now a flag. So that means it's flagged courses across the undergraduate curriculum. And I'm going to shrink this and just show you the call for proposals that went out briefly. This went out across all areas where faculty are teaching undergraduates because they needed these courses and they needed to go through the approval process in the core curriculum committee. Back to our presentation here. So we received new CILT proposals starting last fall, and there were two faculty fellows. So I am the current CILT core area representative. Martha is a faculty fellow, and a faculty member from biology is also a faculty fellow. And we review course proposals, which include the syllabi and any relevant assignments. And after reviewing the first few proposals, we came up with a guiding document, which I'm happy to share with folks after today's meeting. I just have to strip out some of the links to individual syllabi and assignments that we've put in there as kind of guides for faculty. But we want to just show how, we're really advising faculty on how to make sure that they're demonstrating where the course aligns with the information literacy learning outcomes, showing that in the course schedule, showing it with rubrics, showing it with oftentimes scaffolded assignments, and being able to promote the services of our subject liaisons. And that's key. Oftentimes we already see that the faculty members have created spots for their subject liaisons to come into the class. This just gives you a little bit of information about the approval process. So the faculty submit their materials to the core representative. Hopefully, most of the time it happens. They don't have to. Sometimes I see these materials in the week before the meeting, and then I consult with the faculty fellows to see what our decision is going to be. We provide feedback though when they do submit their work early. Oftentimes we see reviewed materials a second time or a third time. And then I provide my decision in the core curriculum committee, which happens monthly, to either approve, conditionally approve, or for the course to be revised and resubmitted. If they've already submitted to us, we have a separate email for this, myself and the faculty fellows, then most likely it's going to be approved because they've gone and revised the course more than once. So Martha and I will tag team this a little bit. You can go ahead, Martha, and just talk a little bit about our impact on library instruction and what some of our lessons are learned.
Yeah, so we've got a little bit more of an instructional reach. Having that call for proposed courses, I think really put information literacy on the forefront of a lot of people's minds, having them integrated into their courses in a more meaningful way. And then having them think about the subject librarians as well. But it's also given us the ability to target research-oriented classes. When we do our outreach, asking people to invite us in, we can target those classes that have the flag on them. And then it's given us some opportunities for more in-depth instruction. So when we have the learning outcomes tied to an assignment, then we can see directly where our work is going to be most impactful.
Yeah, and at this point, I know we run out of time. We want to go to the Q&A. But now I'm at the point where, as coordinator, I'm talking to liaisons about, how to find those CILT approved courses in the course search, update them when courses are approved, and let them know when they're approved by. So there's a schedule for, if it gets approved by a certain date, it's going to be ready to go for, say, the next academic year, or sometimes it's the following semester. And just letting folks know that, hey, you've got a couple more courses that have been approved. Some of them have multiple sections, so there's really opportunities for instruction. And we'll have to also reevaluate to see if that is going to impact, instruction, and if it's going to, create an imbalance, if some people are going to be doing more instruction than others, because some departments have actually submitted more courses for approval than others. So there are definitely areas that are more covered with the information literacy flag than others. But I'm going to leave the lessons learned slide up and go to the Q&A as well, so that again, give you some opportunity to ask us any questions, and also maybe reflect on where information literacy exists in your general education requirements, and how that does or doesn't impact library instruction at your institutions.
Thank you so much, Hugh and Martha. If you all have any questions, please put them in the chat, raise your hand, feel free to unmute.
Yes, Tricia.
Hi, I'm just looking at your lessons learned here,
Yeah.
and the libraries asserted their roles every step of the way in this process. So I guess I would like to know, did you feel any pushback on that? Because I know that's something that on my campus we're having to constantly do despite pushback. So I just wonder how it feels at USD.
Yeah, absolutely. I think many of us would be familiar with that, right? Whether you're faculty or whether you're academic staff, whatever your status is, you often have to constantly educate and re-educate your faculty colleagues about your role. Um, and it helps when you have an official role, say, on the core curriculum committee, right? And they have to reach out to you. But even getting on these task forces initially, especially in early days. It was Martha who did the initial work in 2013. And then, there was difficulty when the second task force was formed for the, reimagining of information literacy in the core, which resulted in the split of critical thinking and information literacy. Our desire was to have one person on the task force and then the coordinator of instruction, and that didn't happen. I later came back because I had been on the core curriculum committee in the past, so people were familiar with me, but they, didn't make room for that. And as we alluded to, we weren't asked. In fact, there was resistance to the fact that as a library, we wanted to be able to have a vote on those outcomes, and we weren't successful in that. The rationale being that we don't host undergraduate programs. So I don't know if that answers your question or speaks to what your experience has been, but short answer, yes. I don't know if you want to weigh in on that a little bit, Martha.
I think you summed it up pretty good. I think I think part of the problem early on in 2013 is, well, I don't want to go into the weeds about it, but the library was not independent at that moment. We were under the College of Arts and Sciences. So I was able to say, like, as a faculty in this area, somebody from the library should be on here, asked, asked again, and it happened. But from then on, just keeping our ears to the ground, because we weren't always notified when these things were happening, but keeping our ears to the ground when something pinged about it, jumping into the room and asking to be involved, and asking to be on the committees and be on the task forces. It took a lot of that early on. And then I think by the time we got to the second and third task forces, So we're pretty good about including us. But again, we had to fight to even just present the library faculty endorsement of the learning outcomes. So,
Even to get the word search, I think it's in
oh
there
yeah, that was
for the first
difficult.
learning outcome. There was resistance to that. So even
Yeah.
concepts that we take for granted as librarians, uh, there were certain things that it wasn't that the faculty didn't want words in there or concepts in there, but they didn't want to be hamstrung by language. There's all sorts of different feelings about learning outcomes and assessment. We're not all on the same page, and you find out when you're in a large meeting. Now, as far as once we were on the task force, I'm thinking back to the 2019 task force. Once you're on a task force and you volunteer to chair, I don't think there was resistance to that because some people just go, great, you want to chair this thing? You want to take on the extra work? You go ahead. But getting on, but then also being heard.
Yeah.
And even being heard from our library colleagues. Not all of the liaisons are doing primarily library instruction. So they've got other tasks, and they have other priorities for their instruction. I mean, even when the core curriculum was introduced in 2017, it was just before I became coordinator, and that's when the new first year writing component was introduced. And saw as my priority as the English liaison prior to being coordinator was to reach out to that group and to make sure we were making inroads with first year writing, which we eventually did. So I had to kind of look back and think about, well, why wasn't I involved in 2017? And I think, oh yeah, because I had this other thing I was doing. I was full up with my regular duties.
Yeah, I think it just speaks to how important it is and how difficult it is for librarians to be integrated in like standing committees across campus so that they're already at those tables when these task forces come up.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of
Yes,
work
it
Yeah.
on
is. And
top of
and
our
I
full-time jobs.
Yeah.
And I will say, our work, as Martha said, there was money set aside for stipends for the when the new information literacy competency was launched and the flag for that work. So I and the faculty fellows are compensated for that service work. Before that, our work, like most of the people who are on the core curriculum committee, was not compensated additionally. It's just part of our service work.
All right. Thank you so much, Hugh and Martha. I think we're gonna have to leave it there. Um, Thanks for taking the Zoom back. I really enjoyed that. Okay, I'm gonna take off these spotlights and we're gonna move along to our next presentation. Go ahead, Sam.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy to introduce our next presentation titled Critical Assessment Practices in Academic Libraries. What is critical assessment and how can librarians use it to better understand our relationship with student learning? This presentation will be brought to us by Tricia Lansky, who is the Health Sciences and Human Services Librarian at Cal State University San Marcos. She holds an MS in Information Studies from the University of Texas at Austin and is currently pursuing a doctorate of education in higher education at Cal State University, Fresno. Her research focuses on how library leaders can support critical, equity-centered assessment practices in academic libraries. So this presentation will be about 20 minutes with a 10-ish minute Q&A at the end. Feel free to utilize the chat for the end. Tricia, take it away.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. Let me get my screen all set up so I can see everything I need to see first. It's good to see all of your picture boxes. If at any point you want to unpicture box yourself and say hi, I'd be happy to see your face as well, but no pressure because my box was off too while I was eating. So today we're going to talk a little bit about my work in critical assessment over the past few years, not just my own work, but the work of me and my colleagues at the CSUSM library, and really kind of our thought process behind the changes we've made to the way we do assessment. And I just want to share a little bit about that in the context of what we're kind of seeing in the bigger landscape of academic libraries when it comes to assessment and higher education in general. Okay, so who am I? You already know where I work and what my specialty area is. My whole academic career in libraries, I've kind of been interested and focused on assessment. I participated in the ACRL Assessment and Action Program back in 2015. Almost all of my articles relate to assessment in some way, so assessing an instruction type in a one-shot, to assessing tutorials, to assessing our collections, to assessing a student internship. So I've definitely grown over the years, but I think the last 5 years have represented a really significant shift in the way that I view assessment. And it aligns with this idea of kind of infusing critical practices into our assessment methodologies. So when I'm talking about critical assessment, this really represents a critique of the dominant assessment motivations that currently live in academic libraries and have for about the past 20 or so years. It's situated as a social and political practice. So this has a purpose. It's meant to be transformational, not neutral. And it strongly rejects this neoliberal ethos that I think we can feel in all of our universities right now, the kind of pressure to become more business-like, to become more like corporations, to take up those efficiency ethos and the customer service mentality that I think we can have felt in academic libraries for a while now, but it's just an extension of what we're feeling in higher education, right, in colleges and universities as a whole. So equity and social justice is at the core of critical assessments, and so is the purpose to disrupt inequitable systems, right, to identify and disrupt these systems that keep imbalances and inequities in place. And this last one is my favorite. It's the questioning of dominant logics, so assumptions that we take for granted. So for example, why are we assessing this outcome? Why are we interested in the student learning outcome? Are students interested in this? Do students value this outcome? How do we know? Like, continuously questioning what we're doing, the way we're doing it, is a really core component of critical assessment. And the literature has gotten about to this point of giving us ideas how to reflexively practice this type of assessment, but that's about where it stopped. The last 15 years of academic library assessment. Okay, so this is just a comparison slide between, I think, what we can label as kind of business as usual, the thing that's kind of accepted in higher ed sort of generally, and also what we see our professional organizations kind of tout as assessment as usual, right? Or assessment that we need to be doing. And this all began, of course, part of it began with the value agenda in 2010, where there was a very strong message that academic libraries are now in the place where they have to prove that they have value to the university, that they have to establish that there is evidence that shows that we have value to students and we have value to this university. And while critical perspectives and approaches were briefly mentioned in the report, they were largely kind of brushed off, with the reasoning being that this is impractical given the realities of our situation, the realities that we face. And this is kind of a very neoliberal like infusion of like, we don't have time to do this. This isn't practical. This takes too much work. We need to keep moving with the business of the university and the way that the university is doing business, right? So a critique, this kind of shows assessment as a mechanism of audit and compliance rather than a mechanism of improvement or establishment of relationships or the improvement of the lives of students or anything like that. This really is an accountability driven, value proving method of assessment. And in the past few years, this has kind of drifted into a new area of support for the use of learning analytics in libraries. And very similar messages are being shared about, if libraries are not participating in learning analytics and the gathering of student data in order to improve student outcomes in this very specific way, we are falling behind and we are not, in fact, doing the job that we need to be doing. So, in contrast to this, is a much messier approach, and it includes the reflective practice, centering equity, continuous changing, continuous reflection and consideration about our methods and our approaches, and really interrogating all steps of the assessment cycle, from what's the purpose, who are the people who should be involved, to who is looking at the data and making sense of it. Is it just a librarian who should be making sense of this data, or should there be participation from other partners in this process? The focus on improvement rather than accountability, and the focus on relationships, right? And how we relate to our students, how we relate to faculty and staff in the library, and how that can be kind of closer to the goals or the values that we want to be reaching, rather than this other approach that is, I'm proving that I'm doing my job. I'm proving that I have value in this space. And I also wanted to mention that the methodology doesn't have to be a very specific way. There is a connection between qualitative methodologies and critical approaches, of course. But there can be approaches that fall under qualitative and quantitative. They just have to be critically examined and equity focused. So this Berg article in 2018 has a good discussion of how quantitative methodologies can be used to reach equity focused ends. Okay, so this was the question that's been guiding me for the past few months, is where did this conversation go? So a lot of the articles that I have cited so far and a lot of the literature I've searched on this topic just kind of peter out at about 2020. I think in 2022, where did my book go? This nice book was published, Reframing Assessment to Center Equity. This was a 2022 book. And then it kind of dropped off. So what have we been occupied with? What has been taking our time? We had the pandemic years, right? And just trying to keep our head above water. We've experienced the Trump administration and their impact on higher education and how that impacts our funding. I think many of us spent the last year or two in a panic about funding in our universities and cutting budgets and all kinds of horrible stuff. And then the rise of artificial intelligence and the importance it has taken on in our university settings. I like this quote from this Coleman and Penkel article in 2020. Imperatives to be efficient, measure impact, scale services, and support larger institutional priorities for improvements in student retention and enrollment are not conducive to efforts to carve out space and time for dialogue. So I really feel personally this is a big point here, that the thing that we need to do in order to engage in critical practices in these assessment spaces, we haven't had the luxury of the time, right? Time is money, and we haven't had a lot of money. So I wonder how you have felt over the past 5 years or so. Have you felt like you have been pushing through, one-shot assessments, gathering quantitative data, trying to make sense of it so that you can share it or put it in your file, or feel like you're able to have something to show for it? Or have you had the time to really think about your assessment practices and kind of critique it at a deep level? Okay, so I am going to actually try something. Mentimeter can be difficult for me sometimes, but I'm going to give it a try anyways and see if it works. So I'm going to put this in the chat. It is a Mentimeter participation link. And then I'm going to put up the presentation link and see if this works. Let me start the presentation. Oh, geez. Can you still see my screen? I hope you can. Okay.
Yes.
If folks can click on that participation link and answer the question, how have your last 5 years felt? Have you felt able to invest time into really any critical practices, and why or why not? And now, let me see. And if no one ends up writing anything in the Mentimeter, I will know it didn't work.
It is working.
It is working perfect. Thank you. Overwhelmed, keeping my head above water, putting out fires. Yep. Yeah, critical assessment wane, pandemic budget cuts. I know all last year, it was all budget cuts. That's the only thing we had time to talk about, yes, last year. No administrative support, that's a big one. External pressures, new role. Yeah, you kind of need some agency to be able to create this time and the focus to do initiatives like these. I'm very busy, for sure. Assessment sometimes seems not to be linked to initiatives that actually improve. 100%. As an individual, not an institutional priority. These are all super helpful. The research department is boggled down by the library's needs, so we're not integrated into the larger culture of assessment. Okay, I consider this foundational to what I do, so I keep it centered in my own practice, but I feel like support for larger efforts are scant. Yeah, it really takes a lot of effort to center this kind of work because it's not quick and easy. As a new tenure track faculty member, I feel I'm not expected to dive deeper than the quantitative evaluations and observations required, 100%. Not the extent. Okay, this is all super helpful and kind of confirming what I was thinking. Budget cuts, loss of personnel. Okay. Thank you all so much. This has been great. Recreating our assessment work from scratch. Very overwhelmed. Conducting assessment and evaluation for other library processes. Okay. Yay. Oh, they don't evaluate self-assessing learning. Oh no, I'm sorry. Okay, let me get out of this. Can I get out of this and get back to where I was? Okay, thank you all so much. That was very helpful. And this is how I am like reading the literature, that there was all of this action in this like 8-year period, and then we hit the pandemic, and that was kind of the last that I saw of it. So in our library, we have had to really intentionally center this. Like I think someone put in the Mentimeter, we've had to carve time aside, and we don't have a ton of time, right? Because we've been keeping our head above water too. We've also lost positions. We've also had cuts. So we have had to really try to figure out how we can practice really reflective critical assessment in a way that's manageable. And am I already almost at my time? Okay, that's okay. So we started in 2020, and we've kind of framed this in yearly like pushes or efforts. We focus on questioning really every step of this process. So why are we doing this? Is this going to help us in any way? Why are we collecting this kind of data? Do students care about this? I put out a call for volunteers. Does anyone want to help me with this effort this year? So no one has to do this work if they don't want to. And if no one can do this work one year, then we'll just take a year off. And we're focusing on translating student assessments, SLOs, into department level meaning making. So how do these assessments speak to our approach in our department, and really focusing on making those connections and making a connection to how we can actually strengthen our relationship with students and strengthen their learning processes in the library. And we want to hear from students too. So we've had a couple activities where we've actually asked students, like, what is it that you value in this, and how can we incorporate your values into what we are doing with our assessment? So this is a timeline of some of our department activities. Prior to 2018, we were kind of going through the steps of business as usual assessment. 2020, we started questioning everything, right? How we do our work, why we do our work. especially pushing against data requests that don't accurately reflect the work that we're doing in our department. In 2023, we had a focus group with students and revised our values and guiding principles document. In 2024, we collected student data on what they felt was important to their information literacy learning. And I forget how we framed it, but it took a lot of time to figure out how to ask this question of students. And we gathered this from several different classes. We kind of made the themes useful to us and used those themes in combination with our revised values and principles to identify something to assess in 2025. And it really, the 2025 assessment allowed us to consider what we were teaching in our GEO class, which is an oral communication, like a speech class. And it allowed us to kind of discuss what we needed to do to the lesson plan to create more psychological safety for students to fail and keep trying. Because looking at the materials the students submitted, we could still see the use of ChatGPT, which in this kind of activity and in this environment is not necessary, right? Because it's okay to fail. It's okay to have this try and not succeed mentality in this space. But they were still, like, we could still feel that the students couldn't let go of these tools to just let themselves try something new. So that created a really helpful discussion on how we approach psychological safety in the classroom for students in the context of it's okay that you're not perfect, and it's okay that you don't know this right now, and it's okay to get it wrong, and how we can do that in our classrooms and basically create that safety for them. And next year, we will be revising our learning outcomes with student input. So we're going to take all this stuff that we've learned from students, all of their feedback, all of their voices, and we're going to infuse that into a recreation of our learning outcomes, which we haven't done in a long time. So it'll be a good thing to us to change. So these are not huge jobs each year, right? It's kind of like a piece every year. But we make sure that the critical practice and the critical principles are infused in what we're doing each year, without it overwhelming us and without it taking all of our time and making it so this is just another thing that stops because we're underwater and we can't keep doing it, right? Okay, and I'm gonna skip this because we are at time, I think. But to circle back to the title of this presentation, ultimately the way we assess the work that we do reflects the way we think about and feel about our relationship with student learning. And if we see ourselves as co-creators of learning in relationship with students. And that is not always how I felt, but it's how I'm feeling more and more now as I practice this type of assessment. And it really makes the work feel more meaningful to me. And yeah, and it can help us get to this point with using the principles that come from a critical approach to this kind of library work. Okay. Oh, good. I got a question. Okay. And that is it. So I will welcome any questions, and you can also respond to this as your question or comment, since we do have some time. Ariana, go ahead.
Hi, Tricia. Thank you for your presentation. There were a lot of great things linked in. I have a lot of notes of readings for me to do. I was curious if you could share any strategies. So it sounds like you have buy-in with the department in this critical approach to assessment. If you have any strategies to share on how you got that buy-in, or like ways to develop this shared approach towards assessment with the other instruction librarians.
Absolutely. So the way it happened in our department is pretty kind of organic because we have a pretty strong culture of like PD together. So like readings that we do together, and we have this thing called what do we call it? The January retreat, or our winter learning academy. And 3 or 4 days every January, The teaching and learning department, we all get together for just like 4 days of professional development guided by us. So we do readings, sometimes we'll have a theme. One year we did have a theme, I think it was in 2022 or 2023, that was like about critical assessment, where we talked a lot about it. We did a lot of readings about it. As a group, we read Data Feminism, which really guided our ideas about how we, I don't want to say protect data, how we hold on to our data, and in what situations do we communicate our data and what it means. And so that really helped us kind of conceptualize this. So I would say if you're in a department that maybe there's not a whole lot of buy-in for this type of work, I would start with like a reading group or something where you share readings every month and have like a lunch together and talk about these readings. And hopefully the readings will talk about like critical ways of approaching your work, not just in assessment, but in all areas of librarianship, because they definitely apply across areas. It's not just assessment, it's also critical pedagogy and how we work with students in the classroom. So that's what I would say, is to kind of just build the culture of learning and being open to critical approaches. Yeah, hi, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for this presentation. This was fantastic. I really liked on your slide where you had that comparison of kind of like the value ROI kind of approaches to assessment compared to critical yeah, and the inclusion of partners, the assessed in every stage of the assessment process. And I was wondering if you can kind of give us some examples of how that has played out in practice with your group.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that's like the hardest part. So in like the idealized world, you have, you know, those that are quote unquote being assessed are your partners, and they are part of planning out every stage, right? And you include them in the analysis of the data as well. You make sense of the data and then you give it to them and say, is this right? Like, do you see these themes in what you've given us? In our department and the experience we've had, we have partnered with our students most closely at the identifying our questions. So what questions are the important questions to ask? Like, what do students care about when it comes to their learning and their understanding of information? That has been the way we've been able to do it so far. But of course, more is better, right? So it would have been even better if I had a group of students that I could show the themes to after the fact and say, does this represent like what you were trying to say in the focus group? And that would be ideal, right? And sharing the final products with them. There have not been a whole lot of final products of this group in terms of reports or anything like that. But there have been things that we've achieved. So like the creation of the revision of our guiding principles and edits and changes that we made to our lesson plans. But that's not always the point, is like the things that come out of it, right? But yeah, so I hope that answers your question. We've like done our best, and it's good to do more. But I guess that's like that's the challenge of this, is like trying to do better each time and trying to include the assessed in the conversations as much as possible.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the approach of incremental improvement.
Yes. Yeah. Nobody's perfect. We're all just trying to get better. Okay. I don't see. Oh, Liz, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to give other people a chance before I
Oh,
popped in, and this is maybe a sort of a Pollyanna question, and feel free to say I don't think so. But I'm curious if, I feel like at least the institutions I've been around and people I've talked to, a lot of people are talking about reframing the library's work in light of, budget constraints and things like that. Do you think that that opens any opportunities to be able to ask questions like, what are we doing and why are we doing it? Does that make sense?
Yes, but whenever I hear reframing the library's role in light of
Mm-hmm.
budget cuts, like red flags fly up.
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like that's arena to be very cautious in, right? Um, and and I think that it's important to align the efforts of your department and the work that you do with like the best goals and values of your university, the ones that you think are important and really do address like the growth of the student as a person and and the things that we want for our students. And that always helps. So I guess when we're reframing the role of the library, my initial instinct is reframe it in alignment with the university, the things that you think they're doing best. Right? So, like valuing the student as a whole person, centering equity approaches, like this is all stuff that my department believes strongly in and we align with the university. There's some other stuff that they're doing that we don't necessarily align with. But if I was gonna support a conversation about reimagining our role, I would cling very strongly to those things that we believe are the values that we hold and also we share with the university as a whole. If that makes any sense. I don't know if that answered your question.
Before we go to our break.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for your awesome questions, and I really appreciate the responses in that Mentimeter because I'm going to use those to think about this project going forward. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Trisha. That was so great. So our day is just like moving right along. We're going to take one more break, another 10-minute break. And so I'll pause the recording for that, and we'll come back at 11:45. So see you then. All right. Welcome back, everybody, from our final break. So we're heading into our final session. We've got two presentations and a show and tell. So Sam and I are going to introduce all of those. I will.
Hey everybody, let's kick off our last session with a presentation from Pepperdine. This one's topic is top of mind for me since we're a few weeks away here at Oxy from our WASC visit. So this is assessing for accreditation, how to integrate emerging and traditional literacies. We're going to hear from three presenters. Amy Wyndham is the Drescher Graduate Campus Librarian at Pepperdine University, where she serves as the library liaison for Pepperdine School of Public Policy, Grazia Dio Business School, and Graduate School of Education and Psychology. She previously worked as a research and instruction librarian at Pepperdine's Payson Library, serving as the liaison for the undergraduate communication department. Wyndham has a BA in English Literature from CSUN and an MLIS from UCLA. Her professional interests include information literacy and demystifying the research process. Sally Bryant is the Associate University Librarian for Public Services and Instruction at Pepperdine. In addition to her leadership role, she supports the university as the liaison for international studies, modern languages, film, and screenwriting. She holds a bachelor's degree in history from Bates College, a master's degree in international relations from American University, and an MLIS from San Jose State. Her key areas of interest include information literacy and access services. And Lauren Haberstock works as the director of the Genesis Lab Makerspace and Academic Center for Excellence, and as librarian for emerging technologies and digital projects at Pepperdine Libraries. In her current role at Pepperdine, she directs the Genesis Lab, a dynamic makerspace that offers students, faculty, and staff access to 3D printing and design, virtual reality, 2D design, and space to collaborate and create together. She also works with faculty and students to integrate emerging technologies like virtual reality and 3D printing into their curriculum, academic practice, and research. Her research interests include emerging technologies in higher education, the role of play and making in education, and design. Folks, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you. Sharing my screen now. Okay, hope you all can see that okay. So I'm Amy Wyndham, and we wanted to start out our session today just with a short poll to get a feel for where you all are in your accreditation process. So all you have to do to respond is just scan the QR code you see on the screen, and then you can select continue as guest. You don't have to log in with any account. It will ask you to enter your name, but you can enter in whatever you want if you want to stay anonymous, and then you can respond to the poll. We will have 3 polls spaced throughout our presentation, so we're just doing the first one right now. But if you leave this tab open on your screen, then it'll automatically refresh to the next one. And I'll give you a few minutes to respond. Our questions for this first one is on a scale of 1 to 5, how much is accreditation currently on your radar? So maybe you just finished, which I'm sure is a total relief. It might be a distant memory. You might be starting to gather your evidence. It might be coming very soon, as I've heard. Or are you in the thick of it right now? Hey, it looks like quite a few of you are actually going through it right now. So I'm glad this is a timely presentation for you. Just finished. I'm a little jealous for whoever just finished. Okay. I'll give it just a few more seconds if anyone else is still trying to get in. Okay, thank you to everyone who responded. So I'm glad that some of you, it looks like you're starting the process, you're in the middle of it. So hopefully our presentation will help with that a little. Okay, so just to give you all a little context on where we're approaching this presentation from, Pepperdine Libraries are currently undergoing our formal program assessment review process for accreditation through the WASC Senior College and University Commission. And Sally, Lauren, and myself are all members of our self-study committee, along with 3 other Pepperdine librarians. So this process involves identifying changes that have taken place since our last self-study, which took place in 2018. And as we began to prepare our report, we started to realize that in addition to internal changes that have taken place within Pepperdine Libraries, there's also been a change in how students consume information now. So our previous self-study was heavy on traditional information literacy, but we're now seeing a shift from traditional research to AI-based research and even hands-on creation that's now available in our maker spaces. So this was actually a pretty exciting observation for us, as we're now seeing students become fluent in areas of literacy that were previously overlooked or maybe seen as not necessarily academic. Our observations and experiences in creating our self-study report led us to the conclusion that moving beyond traditional information literacy to embrace a more holistic model that includes primary source, AI, and maker literacies strengthens both student learning and the accreditation process.
Amazing. So to build on that, we really wanted the self-study report that we accomplished, which we'll kind of talk a little bit more about what is a self-study report if you're like, what is that? But we wanted it to reflect sort of the great work that we've been doing and sort of the innovations that have continued to happen in how we present undergraduate information literacy in particular. We also wanted to spotlight the amazing work that our graduate librarians are doing because that wasn't as much a part of our previous reports, and so we wanted to make sure that we are highlighting what our grad campuses are doing. We saw this report as sort of an opportunity to brag on ourselves a little bit, look at all the awesome stuff we're doing. But we also wanted to then look at those emerging literacies that Amy mentioned. So we wanted to see what are we doing in terms of helping build AI literate students through our work, or what are we helping them to do? So some of what we're already doing is sort of helping them understanding prompts and the biases within the AI models. We also took a look at maker literacy and sort of identified where students are building competencies as they work through projects in the makerspace. And then similarly, our special collections has seen such an increase in the amount of students that they're reaching, specifically with faculty bringing their classes in and going through instruction sessions with our librarians there. And so they're really building out primary source literacy within our students. And so we wanted our report to capture all of this. Essentially, we wanted this assessment that we're conducting to showcase the ways that our students are engaging with information across the entirety of the library. Next slide.
As you can see on the slide, we are currently in the midst of our program review year. For a little context, these reviews typically occur every 5 to 7 years, and they give us an opportunity to step back and evaluate our work. Looking at our timeline, the process started off back in the spring of 2025 when our self-study committee was officially formed. By the summer, we started the actual work on the self-study report. That report is currently ongoing right now, and we actually plan to continue refining it even after our external review visit. Speaking of that visit, the external reviewer will be here very soon on March 3rd. Once that visit wraps up, our next steps will be to receive and review their official report. From there, we will use their feedback alongside our self-study to develop quality improvement plans or QIPs moving forward. Now that we've looked at the timeline and where we currently stand, let's see what kind of experience we have here today. So next slide. We're going to launch our second poll. If you joined in on the first poll earlier, you don't need to do anything new. This next question should automatically pop up on your phone right now. The question is, have you ever served on an accreditation self-study or steering committee? Your options are yes, currently serving, yes, in the past, no, but I've provided documentation for one, or no, I haven't been involved yet. Take a moment to submit your answers and let's see what the results look like. Oh, and whether you're a seasoned committee veteran or if this is all brand new to you, your perspective today is very valuable to us. I guess we'll just give it a minute. So looking at the poll results, it seems like some people here are completely new to the self-study process. And if you're feeling a little intimidated, don't worry. I can completely relate. Before this year, I had never been on an assessment committee either. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to transition from the big picture overview into the day-to-day details of our process. So we're calling this assessment in action. So like I said before, this was my first assessment. In fact, out of our group, we only had one member who had served on the previous assessment committee. So we had like cross-departmental representation for our self-study committee. We had information literacy, special collections, and the makerspace all had at least one librarian on the committee. We used the university's Office of Institutional Effectiveness guidelines as our roadmap to keep the process structured. And the comprehensive survey was a very important part of our process. So the one member of our group who had previously been on the committee, he took the lead on our survey. So that was one of the very first things we discussed as a group when we met of summer in 2025. He was incredibly collaborative. He ran every single question by us because he really wanted the whole team on board before we hit send. And the survey itself, focused on the multiplicity of literacies. We built it in Qualtrics and made sure it covered instruction sessions across all our departments, information literacy, special collections in the makerspace. We also relied heavily on emailed reminders to keep the response rate up. The survey itself took the whole fall 2025 semester, and we had some Amazon gift cards as incentive. Our veteran member gave us some golden advice for surveys. Keep it really short. He said a maximum of 5 to 8 minutes to complete the survey, and that translates to about 15 to 25 questions tops. To get the best data, we asked very direct questions like were the instruction sessions useful and who found them redundant? We even included a specific follow-up question to gauge people's interest in one-on-one sessions regarding AI.
Amazing. Another piece of that self-study report is sort of the built-out template that we got from our Office of Institutional Effectiveness. And it asked us to reflect on how we're evaluating students, how we're gathering feedback from students. And so this led us in our committee to re-examine our program learning outcomes. At the time, we only had established program learning outcomes for our information literacy programs. So we quickly realized, oh, we should have program learning outcomes, not just for information literacy, but for these other literacies that we're trying to develop, or we already have been developing them. So they should be a part of what we offer as part of our program learning outcomes. We also took some time to then dive into the student learning outcomes. What do we want our students to walk away from our sessions with? Not only to obviously complete this report, but really to be able to communicate well with our faculty and our students about what we intend to offer them, what they can accomplish when they come to the library for instruction, engage with our librarians. And so we revised our information literacy student learning outcomes. And then because we were dealing with emerging literacies, for us at least, we had to define what do we mean by AI literacy? What do we mean by primary source literacy? What do we mean by maker literacy? And so we took some time within our committee to evaluate existing either standards or benchmarks, see if anyone else had developed competencies, and then adapted them to our context. This is still a work in progress, so we've already set ourselves up for some project work in the future. This is a process that's never quite done, but this assessment process helped us get the ball rolling and make some good progress. We also needed to essentially benchmark ourselves with the work that we're doing with our peer institutions. That's also part of our self-study report process. And so specifically for information literacy and for our graduate research support, we were able to do this using the ESRL benchmark data. We did find it a little challenging to navigate, so please give yourselves plenty of time to do this and pull out the data that you need. We also found that we needed to essentially supplement the data we saw there with some of our own data, specifically when it came to digital collections. So make sure you give yourselves ample time to bring together the data that's going to tell your story well. And we also needed to be proactive in seeking out benchmark data. Specifically, our special collections librarian and then myself as the makerspace librarian, we found that the data we needed wasn't really reflected in the ACRL benchmark survey. And so we needed to actually reach out to our peers. This was additionally challenging for me because a lot of our identified peers for the library don't have makerspaces in their libraries. So I essentially had to expand my scope to other R2 institutions and source the data myself a little bit. So we had to be proactive. So again, give yourselves time, but generally people are very helpful. That's what I found. I at least had people emailing me back, be like, absolutely, I can help, no worries. So we're going to transition into our third and final poll. And we have a question about literacies. Yay! So we're curious, which literacy do you find the most challenging to measure in your current assessment process? If you're not involved in any assessment processes, this doesn't have to be accreditation, it could just be internal. Which one do you think would be the most challenging? We'll give you a little bit of time to respond. Seeing lots of data AI literacy. I'm right there with you. And we can all put our heads together and try to figure this out, right? Perfect. In the interest of time, I'm going to keep us moving along. So we'll go to the next slide. So lastly, we have lots of data. Yay, we did it. But we also within our committee wanted to think sort of beyond the data and figure out what can we do to really reflect the work that's happening in our library, and especially with our instruction librarians. What are they doing to solicit feedback within their sessions? How are they evaluating students within their sessions? How are they essentially using metrics that aren't always captured in sort of number of instruction sessions, or how long was the instruction session? So we reached out to all of our instruction librarians to collect this information and sort of ended up with kind of two pots of how our librarians are engaging our students. So the first pot is that behavioral performance-based assessment. This is often sort of observing what happens in the classroom as you're teaching, especially if you've assigned sort of a task or assignment for the students to accomplish, or they're doing some sort of activity and you have the chance to kind of circulate, see how's it going? Are they learning what they need to? Where did they get stuck? And essentially building that into the feedback loop of improving next sessions. There's also sort of this other pot of using digital tools or reflections to either get on the spot feedback or evaluation using tools like polls, like we're doing, or getting that longer term feedback and evaluation through either written reflections, quizzes, assignments, but things that take a little bit of time for the students to kind of marinate and ponder what they've been learning. And then we tried to build all of this back into our self-study report to, again, kind of capture what are our students learning and how are they learning that. So we'll go to the next slide.
These for our findings, gaps, and future outlook. So what did we actually learn? We talked a lot about, we talked about closing the loop, which means taking the data you've gathered and actually doing something with it. So most notably, we need to really up our AI literacy instruction, which we're now actively addressing. And then the long-term impact is it's a tool that helps us identify gaps and pivot our library services. Next slide.
Okay, so we know the accreditation process can be undeniably overwhelming and challenging. So we wanted to provide some tips and takeaways to help ease the process. So one of the first things we learned was to make the experience as authentic as possible. So instead of just approaching it as this box ticking exercise that we're all forced to do, the process can actually be incredibly helpful to your students if you make the assessment authentic to the learning experience. So what do I mean by this? Well, the accreditation process actually provides you with the time and resources needed to truly examine library programs and teaching methods in a deeper way than most of us ever actually have time to initiate otherwise. So you can take advantage of the gift of time, use what you learn. The time can be utilized to bridge student learning with your library or university's strategic planning by examining and revising PLOs and SLOs, like we mentioned. Examining benchmark data from peer institutions can help you revamp your current programs and policies to better meet student and faculty needs. And you can use student and faculty feedback to identify service gaps and restructure library instruction to include emerging technologies in a meaningful, relevant way that you know your students want to learn. So if your end goal is to view the accreditation process, not just as a compliance requirement, but as an opportunity to highlight library intervention and improve service quality, then you'll actually be helping your students receive a more well-rounded education that bridges traditional library instruction with modern tools. And that's the end of our presentation. So we will open it up now for questions.
Thank you all for that great presentation. I was wondering, you mentioned briefly that you had this template, I believe, from your Office of Institutional Effectiveness. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how involved, how helpful they were, because I personally have never had to lead an accreditation process. So like how much guidance do they provide you in approaching this process, or was it mostly, driven from the internal knowledge of the one member who had already gone through this process previously?
So I can start out and say, like, it was a form that they gave us. So we were answering questions. It was basically, they would ask us for our SLOs. They would ask us if our SLOs were aligned with our university's mission and to provide documentation. It was a series of, Q&As basically. But I will say there was a little bit of a process with that because they were also revamping their template for us, and we fit into this. They have a academic template and a non-academic template, and we fit into the non-academic template because we were the library as opposed to an actual department, and they gave us multiple forms. So we would start filling out a form and then they told us it changed and we had to start over a few times. So definitely give yourself a lot of time. You don't really know what's going on at the back end of your university. Sally and Lauren might have more to offer on this also.
Nope. I mean, that's exactly. They are very pleased with everything that we've done. So, but yeah, it's complicated compared to a division, you know,
Yeah, I feel like we were sort of straddling this because we do sort of we kind of straddle the like, yes, we fall under the non-academic template, but a lot of the work that we do maybe addresses more of the questions they would answer in an academic template. So I think sometimes we felt like we were repeating ourselves a lot throughout the form, but that was sort of the nature of the form. And so it was up to us to be creative and like, okay, we already talked about this. How can we spin the question, answer the question we wish we were asked, and do that in a creative way? So definitely take some creative license.
Yeah, I like that, the spinning it in the ways you'd want it to answer. And it kind of reminds me of Hugh and I believe it's Martha's presentation on having to insert yourself and really advocating for the library as an academic versus, I don't know, right? We're always straddling those differences.
Absolutely.
Here, I see a hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was wondering with the form, because we've had to use similar forms from our equivalent for institutional effectiveness. But because we are an academic unit, we are bound to the requirements of an academic unit, even though, as like you pointed out, what we do in a library can bridge both, right? I think we call our non-academic units co-curricular, the ones that get assessed. But so with your forms, were you allowed to change any of the sections? Because in both for our academic program review and then before that, our last WASP review, we found that we had to actually work with the director of institutional effectiveness, who has a different title now, but that again, that equivalent, in order to make the documentation work for what we do, or did you? Sounds like you were created within the confines of the form.
Yeah, we were a little, but that's kind of how the multiple forms that we were given came into play. Was we had some questions. So we found ourselves challenged as we were trying to answer things that didn't really fit what the libraries do. So we would contact the office and ask them our questions. And then that's kind of how they were like, oh, well, here's this other form that actually might help you more. And so I think they adjusted things, but we didn't change the questions on our end, but we would go to them with our questions if we were struggling.
Right. So they
And
were
we had quite a
receptive.
few.
So
They
they
were
were receptive
receptive.
and helpful.
Yeah, they were. And we did have multiple Zoom appointments with them to go over the process. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I had sort of the same question, but because libraries were always like a mystery third thing, so we ended up having to work with our accreditation officer to like make this like more student focused things and academic things find again a mystery third thing for our accreditation things to work for us.
And maybe one day they'll come up with one like just for the libraries that will actually be more helpful. That would be nice.
Yeah. I feel like it comes up every time for everyone. So
These are great questions. Thank you all.
That's just one more question. Other than more AI stuff, what other things, like in brief, are you implementing now based off of some of the results from your benchmarks and survey data?
Well, we have like a stopgap PLOs, but we really need to sit down this summer and really go over those. Last summer we did completely overhaul our SLOs, and it was a long summer project, but we need to do that, and we also need um, to go over the primary source SLOs as well. We have um, just kind of like we came up with some on the fly when we were thinking of it, but we really need to like go through the peer institutions and figure that out more. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we've realized that we now have to do because of this assessment.
yeah, I think the other piece of it is recognizing that a lot of the work that we do is then setting the next group up who has to do the WASC evaluation report, setting them up for essentially delivering on things that we've set forth. And so I think we're trying to think through how do we set them up for success instead of everyone just inheriting this process and they're like, what did these people do to us? So we're trying to be kind to future committees.
Okay, thank you. Do any of y'all want to say any last words or anything before we roll into the next thing?
So you got this. You can do it. If we can do it, you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just give yourselves plenty of time. That's the
Mhm,
biggest
mhm.
advice I think we can give.
So the thing we all tell our students.
Exactly. Yeah. It's hard to follow
Take
it
your own
yourself
advice. It'll
sometimes.
be fine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for your
Thank
presentation.
you.
All right, we're gonna roll into our next thing. And while I introduce, Liz will probably do some background stuff to unspotlight and get ready for the next one. But our next session is a show and tell. So it's going to be programmed as a 10-minute presentation with a 5-minute Q&A. It's called Large Scale Assessment in an Online Embedded Library Assignment. And our presenters are from UC Berkeley. Margot Hansen is a science instruction librarian at UC Berkeley. Margot provides liaison support to engineering programs. And Krista Anundakutan is a public health and optometry librarian at UC Berkeley. As a liaison librarian, Krista has collaborated with librarians and faculty to teach information literacy to undergraduate and graduate students at 3 public universities. Take it away.
Thank you. I am Krista Anandakutan, and for our show and tell, I will start with some context, and then Margot Hansen will continue with a short demonstration.
And I also want to give a shout out to Lisa Ngo, who's part of our project team, but for our short presentation, it's just going to be the two of us for time.
Yes. Thank you. So the UC Berkeley Library Sciences Division has supported a library research skills assignment in Bio 1B for many years, which serves a wide variety of STEM undergraduate students. So to streamline access to the library assignment, we recently transitioned from the edX platform to the Canvas LMS, which is the platform used for the main Bio 1B course. It is a large class with approximately 700 students per semester, and the library assignment is a graded assignment. It includes active searching activities for students to practice in our library catalog, and a subject database, which makes grading 700 submissions a challenge. We will show and tell about automatic grading options on edX and Canvas, and also invite suggestions from attendees on any other solutions that you might have tried. Next slide, please. So there are 5 modules developed in collaboration with course instructors, and the modules build on one another, again, from developing a research strategy and conducting a search in a database and so on. We also continue to assign multiple variations of different topics to discourage the sharing of answers. Next slide, please. In 2013, Elliot Smith, our biology and bioinformatics librarian, moved the library research skills assignment onto the edX platform. He developed custom coding to enable auto-grading of free text responses. So here we show a snapshot of one question at the top, asking students to enter the keywords they would use for their search, and on the right, a snapshot of the code for that same question and answer field. Next slide, please. We then transitioned the library assignment to Canvas, where the Bio 1B course is, and this meant a shift to multiple choice questions for auto grading. With feedback and testing from course instructors and our library colleagues, we made incremental changes, which allowed us to assess their impact. And Margot will now show you the edX and Canvas interfaces.
So I'm going to show you a little close-up of what was on those screenshots because it was very hard to see. So this is the edX platform that that Elliot developed, and it's really fantastic what he created. But since edX is on a separate platform, and it created like a little bit of a barrier for students to access to create registration on a different platform. So that's one of the reasons we transitioned from edX. So for example, this question about developing keywords from a topic and distilling keywords as part of the search process. This free text box right here, you could put in some of the concepts from the example up here of the topic and put it in, and then it's different variations of what you're typing would be automatically graded as correct, or if it wasn't marked as correct, then Elliot has all these suggestions and help guidelines down below with some hints to help students be successful. And this is the back end of that. So similar to the screenshot that Krista showed. So here's the how you would search to find information on this topic. And then Elliot coded all of these different variations that people might type in that would be the correct answer so that it wouldn't have to be just one version of that correct answer for them to get it marked correct. So I'll show you what that kind of translates to in Canvas. So now since students don't have that extra additional step of creating an account on a separate platform and logging in, we were able to get feedback from students directly on the content, which was great. And we have a lot fewer questions during the week that this assignment is open about access and access issues, which has been great to have students be able to access this much more seamlessly. So this is the landing page, and then this is the course module setup. And then here's an example of, here's that quiz here. So it translates on Canvas into multiple choice, basically. We did try doing some free text stuff, and you can't do the custom coding in Canvas. So I tried adding in like all the different variations that someone might enter in as free text in the free text option. And it would have, it was not time, it didn't work in terms of the time, the amount of time it would have taken. So we went with multiple choice. So with these, this is an example of coming up with different truncation, which, as it turns out, is one of the students' favorite things to learn about. I think it's like a secret code or something. And so that was fun to learn. And then this is the back end of that question with the editing. And then we still do have the hints. So if someone has the incorrect answer, then we have hints and links to extensive LibGuide documentation with assistance for students so that they will be successful. And they have multiple options or multiple attempts to try to get the right answer, because our goal is for them to actually learn the content from this assignment. So that's a quick little sneak peek of the showing part of the show and tell. And then once we get all the grades from the 700 students per semester, after the week that the assignment is open, we submit it to the course staff, and then they incorporate it into the course grades. So it's like a regular assignment that the students complete during the course of their semester. Also part of our assessment project or process is getting feedback from students. So we send out a post-assignment survey to students to get feedback on their experience. And these are just a couple of little snapshots from that. The one on the left side basically is just demonstrating that they feel like they got, that they learned all of these different things with really high response rates of what they felt like they learned in the different outcomes that we had. And then over on the right side here are some examples of text responses that we got, which let us see that the content that Elliot had originally developed really gets to shine through now that we don't have the access barrier on registering for a different platform. And so transferring it to the platform and keeping the content as close to the original as possible has made us be able to see like different little areas that we might be able to change over time, and then assess each of those changes instead of trying to overhaul everything all at once and not being able to tell which variable might be making a difference. It's very rare, I feel like, for students to say a thank you for an assignment in class, but this was not the only these were not the only responses that we got. We got several responses of appreciation for the content in the assignment, which was pretty exciting. And so we got to share that with Elliot, who originally developed it. So part of our sneaky guide to, or reason for presenting this, was to hear from other people who might be doing similar things, like asynchronous assignments that are embedded in courses and how you are doing them, or if there are large courses that you provide instruction for, how you are handling that. So we would love to hear from you during the Q&A part about that. That's a question we have for all of you.
I mean, so I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand, but this is Liz. I am curious how many other people here have classes sort of on this scale, or especially like asynchronous objects where you have this kind of number, these kinds of numbers, and yeah, how you've approached that. Is this across sections, or is it's 700 students in not in one class, right?
Yeah, there's like a huge lecture, and then a ton of sections for the labs. So it includes all of the students who are enrolled in the massive lecture. And it used to, before it went online in 2013, there were librarians who were visiting every single section, and the grading was hand graded.
Yeah, I guess I just want to say it's really helpful to see this approach because I work at a CSU and I don't think we've traditionally had as large classes, but now with I'm sure all the things we've talked about, right, with budget cuts and shifts in the way instruction is happening, the course caps are increasing. So I think we've started to think about like how do you do instruction in these larger student classes when you can't have as many like intimate active learning activities. So I really appreciate you demoing your example.
So yeah, lots of comments in the chat.
Oh, great. Thank you. So my email address is on there and you can contact me and I'll share it with Krista and Lisa. And we would be happy to hear from people who want to chat about this kind of approach or how you're doing things on your campus to get ideas from each other.
Thank you, Margot and Krista. I think we're all, I'll speak for myself. I'm just very impressed by this, so I don't have anything to ask about or add to it. But thank you so much. I want to give like one last chance for a question contribution about your own before we move into our last presentation. But this is so great. Thank you. Yeah, lots of people in the comments talking about their large classes.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. All right, I'm gonna try to do two things at once here. But you know what? I'm going to pause the recording before I do that, and then you won't have to watch me do it because our next one is not going to be recorded here. And let me just share my screen. This has been such a great day. Thank you, everybody, for hanging in there, especially those who have been here all day. That's really awesome. So I wanted to just mention a few things. Again, thank you everyone to our presenters, to our committee members. This was such a great day. And thank you to everyone who's joined us. I noticed I was just thinking about all the presentations today and with the theme of manageability, keeping things manageable, keeping things meaningful, and investing in what's meaningful to us and to our students. I also noticed a lot of people talking about incremental progress, which I also want to give a big shout out to. You know, we are doing what we can and choosing what's meaningful to us and what we are able to accomplish. So, in short, you know, constructing meaning and stories within our own contexts. This is constructed and contextual. So I wanted to point out that, you know, as a Carl interest group, we will have a showcase at the Carl Virtual Conference in April. I'm going to put a link in the chat to register for that. It's going to be called I'm a Creep, Shifting Landscapes of IELTS Instruction and Coordination about scope creep, which I think a lot of people sort of touched on today. So watch soon for a call for panelists. So again, join that. You can join the skill listserv. There's a link in the schedule if you want to see that. We hope to see some of you there. And then finally, we have a couple of announcements here. Again, reminders about joining and renewing your Carl membership, joining the skill listserv, and then finally completing an evaluation for today. I'll also send this out when I send out conference materials and the recording, and I'm going to put the link in the chat too. But this will really help us plan future events, plan future skill works, all of that. And these topics were really informed by some of these surveys that we've done of members. So I hope that you enjoyed today. I really did. Thank you for joining. Please consider participating in on the board or the planning committee or submitting a proposal next time around. This is one of my favorite professional development opportunities of the year because it's always super relevant to instruction and to what everyone is doing. I'm going to leave the QR code up there for a little bit in case anyone wants to grab it. But then I stop the recording if I can find it.
We are hosting SCIL elections soon, so if you would like to shape the conference theme for next year, consider joining SCIL, the SCIL board, and it's always a really fun time. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Thanks, Ariane. Okay. All right. Hooray. Thanks. Thanks, board. Thanks, committee. We'll see you all soon. I guess I'll end the meeting. It's like an awkward moment.